Here It presents Sandcastles by Brian Coughlin. A boy stepped onto a beach. He felt the cool white sand crunch between his toes. He shook his bucket. The plastic shovel within rolled around, clattering against the sides. An elderly man who sat nearby each morning listening to the surf noticed the boy and said, "What adventures are you up to today?" "I'm going to build a castle," the boy said, and he was off before the elderly man could reply. The boy started to build his first sandcastle and found it was not an easy task. Far more needed to be considered and planned than he'd anticipated. Each piece of a larger project required individual attention and skill. He had to learn and practice. So he did. One of the most important lessons of this early stage of his sandcastle building career revealed the unforgiving nature of his canvas. No matter how beautiful the boy's creation, the tide took no notice. It rose and fell. No matter how he designed his castles, by dawn his work was gone. Still, he kept at it. He very much so liked building sandcastles, and he learned there was no use mourning in the morning. The boy grew into a lad. He kept building and learning. He made just what he wanted, just the way he wanted, and he improved incredibly. There was more joy in those little sandcastles than any others he would ever build. The discovery of new techniques and perspectives was far more enjoyable than perfecting what he already knew. He tried new things when they occurred to him. With each completed work, his talent at and love of building sandcastles grew. During this time, very few others ever saw his work. His part of the beach was small and, foremost, beneath notice. Nonetheless, the lad's skill and confidence bloomed. He ventured out more often to the busier beaches to demonstrate his skill. His sandcastles proved quite popular, and he liked when someone stopped and noticed. Compliments and criticisms were bandied about, but rarely bothered the lad. He simply built sandcastles, and he understood other people were okay with him building his sandcastles, so long as that was all he was doing. Some took sandcastle building seriously. They worked in teams and entered competitions, or at least those competitions with cash prizes large enough to be worth their time. Those groups liked reminding everyone who was allowed to do what on the shared beach. Of great fortune for the lad, amongst those serious groups of builders was a wealth of knowledge and technique. When they offered criticism, he listened. When they saw he listened, they offered advice, and he listened again. In fact, the lad took direction from whomever stopped by and had an idea. The experienced craftsman and the wildly imaginative child both helped him grow. While the lad enjoyed others discovering his talents, he missed the quiet old days when he worked peacefully on the balconies, staircases, and windows he crafted so well. At the same time, he was drawn to the local sandcastle building competitions. He found the teams that were successful won because of their size and coordination. They weren't really any better at building sandcastles, but they were well organized and comprised of talented individuals. Together, they built sandcastles 2 to 3 times the size of the next closest competitor, and with more detail per square inch. This wasn't in the spirit of the competition, which had only started allowing teams to enter so parents could help their kids, but the big teams made the competition more popular, so people went along with it. For a short time, the lad even gave in to temptation and joined a team. They won a competition by building a grander sandcastle than any he'd ever built on his own. But though they won, the final castle wasn't how he'd have built it. It could have been better. Something about winning through strength soured the lad on competitions. He left them, their accolades, and their prize money behind. He returned to his small, quiet spot on the beach and built a sandcastle away from prying eyes. He wasn't sure what he would build, but after a few minutes, he had a good start on a veranda. He brought his eyes down to see from the veranda's point of view, and in his mind he saw a perfect sandcastle. It rolled out toward the sea. Compared to the castle he envisioned, the veranda was very simple, but it had the best view. The lad imagined a story of the castle's architect making a gift for everyone else, while allowing himself very little. He would get the veranda and the chance to see what he'd given to others. That would be his reward. The lad saw it all in front of him and dreamt of building it just the way he wanted. The elderly man, who was yet again listening to the surf, saw the dreaming lad and asked, "Are you practicing for the competition?" "I'm not entering the competition," the lad said. "There's no point. The game is rigged." "I suppose it is," the elderly man said. "That big team makes a mighty fine sandcastle, but if I'm being honest, I'd rather see what you could do if you really went for it. Not to win, but to see what you're capable of. On your best day, giving it your all, nothing held back. What could you accomplish?" "Why?" the lad asked. "Why should I give it my all, only to still lose and have my work washed away?" "To see," the elderly man said. "Just to see." The lad didn't agree, but he no longer felt like working on his sandcastle, so he walked along the beach instead. He didn't set out in a particular direction, but after half an hour of walking and telling himself the old man didn't know a thing, he found the end point of his walk was the competition's sign-up desk. He had to see. The day of the competition, the lad stood alone. It was the only single-player team. The nicer teams wished him luck. The others smirked and condescended, asking how well he thought he could do on his own. "We'll see," the lad said. The competition commenced, and the lad spent the first few hours hauling as much sand from the water's edge as he could. It was exhausting work placing mounds of sand where walls and towers would soon be. Tired though he was when he finished moving the sand, the lad had to keep going because he was far behind the other teams. The competition's rules stated all castles had to be completed by dark. Even as his work took shape, he had to move faster and faster to have a chance to finish. As the other teams completed their castles and sat back to enjoy the fruits of their labor, the lad did as much as he could. More and more detail was filled in as the light faded, but still he wasn't finished. Beach bonfires were started before the sun fully set, and he worked by their light. He was nearly finished when the judges began scoring. Nearly finished, but not finished. The judges promised to take their time and come to him last. He kept working. When the other teams asked for an official decision, the judges agreed with the growing crowd, who felt the competition wasn't over at sunset, but rather when it was dark. They wanted to see the lad finish, so they started more bonfires to give him light. The lad continued. The last sections, which he once worried would never be finished, came together beautifully. Finally, the work completed, the lad sat to the side and watched the crowd delight in the many fine details of his sandcastle. He slipped away before the judges announced a winner. He went home and slept. The next morning, the lad found the beach quiet and the many sandcastles washed away. He walked over to his quiet little stretch of the beach and found the elderly man listening to the surf in his usual spot. "What will you make today?" the elderly man asked. "Something simple," the lad said. "Would you like to build it with me?" "Oh, thank you, lad, but I can't. My back and knees aren't what they used to be. There's not much point in me messing around in the sand anymore." "Sure there is," the lad said. "To see."